Entrepreneurial Edge is brought to you by Business Banking from FNB, because small ideas can lead to big business. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, if you have any comments and suggestions on the show, please send me an email to entrep@abn360.com. Now, still with me in the studio is Phil Duff, co-founder and CEO of SYSPRO. Now, we recently caught up with Meryl Malcolmes, Marketing Director of SYSPRO Africa, to find out more about what the company is doing on the continent.
SYSPRO is the right vendor for Africa. It is a South African-based company which exports, but we have an ecosystem. We've always viewed SYSPRO as a team, and that starts within the building, very much started by the culture of Phil Duff. Almost a family culture, and we have an ecosystem of over 500 people who support the product, and then our users become part of the ecosystem as well. We have 35,000 people through Africa who turn on SYSPRO every day, so we are a very large family or team, and we also believe that to cut costs, that we can create online forums where people can talk to each other and try to reduce the cost of ownership of technology. So it's very much a now possibility into Africa as well to extend these capabilities. And we're seeing with the rise of technology ownership in the simple supply chain, these people can now be empowered and taught about sophisticated things that previously were not accessible. And this is having a lot of success in Africa. It's an amazingly entrepreneurial drive that we're finding when we install software, that people are empowering themselves and actually using the technologies in the smallest villages. And even we're seeing the gogos in their little villages now being able to manage their grandchildren better because they're now empowered with a cell phone, which I think is rather fun. But everybody wants a piece of Africa now. It's very interesting, all the articles we're reading. Africa has its own way, and you need to fit in with that and understand the culture. And it's one of my deep-seated beliefs that we actually put the right team together for a cultural fit. And if we do a big project into Africa, we move the people up there that will actually live there and become part of the whole system. We recently did the Mopani mine, which is a great success. Danny Callow is a great chief executive, and he insisted on empowering the local suppliers, and he's down to a very small percentage of import into Zambia, and the rest is local suppliers who he's empowered through asking us to put our technologies into internet cafes and do the right training so that everybody has an opportunity to quote for the business and be part of quite a sophisticated ecosystem. A school was also, the school needs were also installed, and a hospital. So it's an extremely exciting installation where we see stakeholders, we see shareholders in a FTSE 100 company, all being part of a great installation and a mine. It's a copper mine in Zambia, Mopani. I don't see challenges, I only see opportunities. Lovely people to work with, the local people are very keen to learn. We are going to set up a couple of colleges through Africa to empower people more. But we find actually a very high level of adoption. And we try to keep things simple for people that are first-time users. However, very quickly, these become very, very sophisticated sites. So I think that Africa is only opportunity.
Well, there's your Africa Director, Ms. Malcolmes. Now, a lot of companies have struggled. Africa is often seen, the continent, as a hard market to crack.
Yeah.
How do you think you're going to get into it?
Well, we've been doing business in Africa for a very long time now, and I don't know that we consider it a hard, well, it's not a hard market to crack, not for us, because we've been doing business right through Africa for a very long time. We haven't got offices beyond South African borders, but we've got some very good resellers, value-added resellers, people who do partnerships with us, Nigeria, Kenya, so on and so forth, and we've actually had a very good uptake of companies using our software, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and so on and so forth, yeah.
Now, you've got 14,500 users in more than 60 countries around the world. Where does Africa fit in with the global picture when it comes to this software?
Well, because it's our home base, Africa is for us as our home territory, and we only started expanding overseas in 1988. I say only, even that's a fair time ago, but that's when we first started looking beyond South African borders. And you know, I think it's very important as a company, if you really want to grow, you have to look beyond your own borders. South Africa is fine, but there comes a point when you have to, if you want to be a serious business, you have to look beyond your borders. So we started moving up into Africa, and Zimbabwe was an obvious place for us to go into. And then once we got into Africa, we started looking at overseas. In Australia, we got involved in 1989, and around the same time we got involved in Los Angeles with a couple of guys who wanted to start selling our software, and that's how we grew sort of organically around the world.
What about the Australian market? You did mention that in some of the papers you sent to me, that it was an interesting market for you guys. Why was that?
Well, because it's a diverse market. You see, South Africa is a fairly well-known, for us now, it's a fairly well-known market. We understand the market, we understand the dynamics and how the culture of the company. But Australia, well, the Australian office also manages the whole of Southeast Asia. That's a hugely diverse area of the planet. And they have different requirements. So in Australia, it tends to be more into distribution rather than manufacturing. Southeast Asia is manufacturing. So the requirements on us as a software vendor differ. And then you go into places like China, which that's a difficult place to crack. That is seriously complicated because of the government legislation and who you do partners with. And yet we still got some sites there, and we're starting to grow there. But those are difficult countries to crack.
How lucrative is that market in China, you think, from what you're...
Well, it has the potential to be absolutely huge. But it is a very difficult one. They're quite parochial. Government tends to favour local Chinese software houses, so it becomes very complicated to get inroads. We've been successful going in with multinationals because they prefer a thoroughbred product. And products stood the test of time. It's got some legs. We've been around 34 years, so we're likely to be around for another 34 years. So multinationals has been our way of getting into China.
And what about your penetration of the market? I mean, how big size of the world market would you say still uses ledgers and pencils? You know, doesn't even use your kind of software?
Well, it's surprising actually. We to this day, I mean, we're in the 21st century, and we still come across customers running decent-sized businesses running on Excel or a Microsoft Access database, and we think, how on earth do they survive? Well, the answer is they don't survive. And it takes a while for someone like the CEO of a company to wake up the fact that the whole thing is creaking and seriously needs some massaging. And that's when they start going out to tender. And I'm still surprised how many companies run on this sort of rather archaic way. Having said that, we now come across quite a lot of companies who are on their third or fourth iteration of some ERP or some manufacturing package. And you probably think, third or fourth, why are they changing? Well, because they haven't chosen wisely, and they've gone through this iteration of going through some implementation, and it's failed miserably, and there are some very classic implementations that failed spectacularly in South Africa. And so when someone says, some bright spark, the CEO says, hang on, we've spent billions on this thing, we haven't got anywhere, it's failed, we need to revisit, we need to find a vendor who will take us through and get us through to the next phase. So we do find still have those legacy, those proprietary bits of software that we're changing, and we're still changing sites that have been through a 3 or 4 iterative process of changing their software.
Now, from a distance, it would look that you've had a dream run, 34 years, 70 million in revenue, growth all over the world, cracking the Chinese market. But I mean, what have been the biggest problems that you've faced in business along the way?
What are the biggest problems? The biggest one has to be, I suppose, when we started in 1978, South Africa wasn't exactly the most popular country in the world. So for us to sell around other parts of the world was a challenge. There was little or no help from the South African government, and to this day we have no help from the DTI. Well, we haven't held a hand up either, but to be honest, but we've got no help from any funding or any quarter. But the biggest single challenge was trying to persuade people, why don't you take a product, and it happens to be written in South Africa, and they will sort of, okay, all right. And I suppose for a lot of hard work, we really pushed, and we were tenacious about it. We kept wanting things to happen. We found some very good partners around the world who would run with us. And but that was the biggest single challenge. The other challenge, I suppose, looking back over a long time, was the singular lack of help from anybody. Back in the days when computers were really a foreign entity and they were a very big risk, so I remember going to a bank in the very early days and saying, look, why don't you lend us, say, 100,000 rand? We want to buy our first computer. And you remember I told the story about Hippo. Okay. So I remember phoning up a bank, I can't remember who it was, it didn't really matter because all banks were basically the same, and said, why don't you lend us 100,000, we'll buy this computer and we're going to do this, and we had a business strategy. So they turned around and said, basically, no. In fact, the story about that is I was concerned about our offices. They were quite small. And so there's a little bit of a story here, which is what not to do, by the way, to try and get funding. This is what not to do. So you have a small office and you think, if I'm going to get the bank to come in to see me, he's going to look at the offices, why would I want to do business with you? You only got 4 people. So I knew the guy next door. And I said to Asher, who's a very good friend of ours at the time, and he ran a consumer electronics firm, can I use your offices? I'm going to phone the bank manager. He can come to your offices and we'll sort of pretend that these are my offices. And that's exactly what he did. So we turned all his photographs of his family, we put them down, put my photograph into his nice big plush office. The appointed day came and the bank manager arrived and he was shown in by Asher, this chap, into what was purportedly supposed to be my office. And this guy is looking around and looking at my office saying, yeah, this is a very nice office, but I don't understand, Mr. Duff, I thought you wanted a computer. Yes, we do. But you're a software house, aren't you? Yes. Well, why does it say consumer electronics on the door outside? And I sort of,
the game was up.
The game literally was up. I was thinking out of a movie. He sort of stood up, gave me a very bad sign, and walked out the door. Times were tough because the banks, they just didn't want to know you.
Did you want to pack it up then, that time?
No.
Not
That's
at all.
when we were very fortunate. That's when I think the next day I happened to be chatting to this guy at Hippo Manufacturing. I said, look, we have this problem. The banks turned us down. He said, no problem, Phil. We'll let you have our computer. So you were unlucky and we were lucky at the same time.
Okay, well, great lesson there for all entrepreneurs. Thank you very much, Phil Duff, the CEO and founder member of SYSPRO, for your insights on this show.